Hi, welcome to another edition of JazzSmack, where tonight we are going to discuss how the Jazz players are in the plus minus, meaning how good are they when they're on the court, how does the team play when they're on the court, versus how does the team play when they're off the court. So we're going to look at all those numbers, and we're also going to discuss what exactly happened with the OKC game at home, where I think many of us anticipated the Jazz play a little bit more competitive game than what turned out to be the case. So let's talk about it.
JazzSmack, NBA and Utah Jazz basketball.
So the numbers we're going to look at, we're not trying to disparage any of the Jazz players or anything like that. We're just taking a look at the numbers, 22, 23 games into the regular season to see where the players stand and see what the numbers are telling us right now. Now, these numbers can be a little bit deceiving because different players are playing against starters and other players are playing against, for the most part, bench players. So, and some players are playing in meaningful minutes, and then some other players, the bulk of their minutes are coming in garbage time. So there's a lot of room to discuss what these numbers actually mean, but still, from an entertainment standpoint, it's interesting to look at where the players stand in terms of plus minus when they're on the court and when they're off the court. So that's what we're going to do at this moment in time, and we're going to discuss this. So let's start with that. So here's the premise. We are going to look at the Utah Jazz plus minus. How do individual Utah Jazz players compare in plus minus? Overall, for the 25-26 season, and Utah Jazz as a team right now, we're talking as a team as a whole, is a negative 8.2 points per game. That's where the team stands as of this moment. So now let's look at the plus minus of the individual players on the Jazz in terms of the per 36 minutes. That's what we're going to look at. We're going to standardize everybody's numbers, and we're going to look at it on a per 36 minutes a game basis. So let's take a look at that right now. And we're going to start first with the on-court per 36 minutes and where that stands. That means if their minutes were standardized to 36 minutes per game, this would be what it equates to in terms of the Jazz in the net positive or net negative. Now, it just so happens that every single player on the Jazz, other than Elijah Harkless and Walker Kessler, who are not included in this data because they just don't have enough minutes to make it any sort of meaningful. But all the rest of the players, the 13 listed here, are all negative. So every player on the team has a negative plus minus at this point per 36 minutes. So number one on this list is Walter Clayton Jr. at a negative 1.1. Next, Kyle Filipowski at negative 2.5. Next, Svi at negative 3.1. After that, Lauri Markkanen, negative 3.2. After that, Cody Williams, negative 5.3. Kyle Anderson, negative 5.4. Jusuf Nurkic, negative 7.5. Keyonte George, negative 7.9. Ace Bailey, negative 8.2. Brice Sensabaugh, negative 11.2. Taylor Hendricks, negative 11.3. Kevin Love, negative 12.9. Isaiah Collier, a negative 15.3. So I look at these numbers, and I know that Walt hasn't played a lot yet. So that can be a little bit deceptive. And when he has played, a lot of his time, other than the last maybe 3 or so games, have been a lot of garbage minutes in those minutes that he did play. So that negative 1.1 can be a little bit deceptive. Now, Walt has played a lot better the last few games, too. He's certainly looking far more comfortable now. He's shooting the ball a lot better from the perimeter. He doesn't look as rushed. So Walt's looking better and better, as is Ace. But the one guy here that really is playing significant minutes, and especially over the last, 10 to 15 games where he's playing meaningful minutes and he's playing really well, in all honesty, is Kyle Filipowski. Kyle Filipowski at number 2 on this list at negative 2.5. I mean, that's great for Kyle, and that shows how much improvement Kyle has done, because Kyle just isn't playing garbage minutes. He's playing real minutes and real solid minutes. And so I think that's very encouraging for Kyle at this point to be a negative 2.5, especially on the defensive end where he so desperately wanted to improve. And I think that's terrific. And that number, of all the numbers here, I think that number is the most positive. I mean, we kind of expect Lauri, even though Lauri's playing huge minutes per game, and so he's in the bulk of the most competitive minutes on the team. A negative 3.2 for Lauri, I think, is pretty good, but we expect him to be in that group of the better players. The Kyle, on the other hand, is the one that's really surprising to me.
I think in looking at this list, I would tell you which ones I think you should throw out of this list. Walt Clayton, like you said, I don't think he's played enough as of yet. Cody Williams, same. I don't think he's played enough. So whatever his numbers are, I think are deceptive. Probably Kyle Anderson too. I mean, Kyle has played some games and then like a lot of DNP. So my guess is Kyle you'd have to throw out of this too. And then probably maybe Kevin Love, same thing. So I do think in this list, there's some guys at the top or bottom that are probably not necessarily representative because they haven't got enough minutes to say. But it is really interesting in there. Like Ace was probably 10 games ago, was probably at the bottom of the list. He's climbed. Isaiah was higher on the list. And what I've seen with Isaiah is teams have just started backing off of him and giving him 8 feet because they don't want him to drive past him and they just want to let him shoot. So that's really hurting him, I think, in his performance, his shooting. We knew that coming in the offseason. It was the big thing, and everybody in the league knows it. So I think that's hurting him, but still minus 15.3 is alarming. Let's face it. And Kyle has not got the attention yet. There's a lot of been accolades of the most improved player, but I would argue honestly that Kyle's probably the most improved player this year, just seeing his performance. And we're going to look at it relative to last year, right? I mean, that's the thing we are going to look at next is relative to last year, but his numbers are impressive. I mean, they still have to improve, but they certainly are much better than we expected them to be.
So we've looked at the on-court per 36 minutes, and we've gone through that. Now we're going to look at, and on the on-court per 36 minutes, the lower the number, the better. So this means that the closer we get to 0, the better it looks for the players. Now, we're going to look at off-court per 36 minutes, and this means that if we were to just average the minutes out, if these guys were to spend 36 minutes on the bench, now that's a little bit deceptive because obviously like Lauri and Keyonte and those guys are not spending 36 minutes on the bench, but at some point we have to just give it a baseline so that the numbers are comparable. So this is off court per 36 minutes in the plus minus, and here the closer the number is to 0, the worse it is. That's how these numbers work. So at the top of this list, we have Keyonte George, a negative 2.1. Next, Isaiah Collier, a negative 2.6. After that, we have Brice Sensabaugh, a negative 3.8. Ace Bailey, a negative 4.1. Kevin Love, negative 4.6. Jusuf Nurkic, a negative 4.8. Taylor Hendricks, negative 5. Kyle Anderson, negative 6.2. Cody Williams, negative 6.2. Walt, negative 8.1. Kyle Filipowski, negative 8.9. Svi, negative 9.6. And Lauri, a negative 12.6. So again, you look at those numbers and you look at the bottom of this list, you look at Lauri, a negative 12.6, and you kind of expect that. The team is a lot better with Lauri on the court. But again, you look at Kyle, and Kyle, a negative 8.9. I mean, that's terrific, again, for Kyle. Now, Walt is there right after that. But you go to look at the top of this list, and you see Keyonte there at a negative 2.1. So, again, we're not trying to disparage any players right now, but this shows you that Keyonte, he's progressed a lot. He still has a lot of work to do to become a plus-type player that can play a meaningful role on a really, really good team. So he's improved a lot, but he has a long way to go, and that pretty much goes for most all of our players. I mean, Lauri, of the roster right now, Lauri is a really established player, a really good player, can contribute to a really good team in a meaningful way. But the other guys, all of our young guys, every young guy that's been drafted over the past 3 to 4 seasons is still a work in progress and has a ways to go before they are to a point where they can play a meaningful role on a really good team.
Yeah, let's face it, is that if you have all negative numbers, you're not a winning team. So if we go back to the prior chart and we say everyone's negative, that ties into what the team overall is, but you need to have some that have a positive plus minus. So you're not winning many games in the NBA, and you're not a good team. So none of these are stellar. Like, let's just say it in the outright is none of these are stellar. These are just relative, like one player versus another and how they're relative. And then looking at it to prior years, which we're going to do, then, you can see how somebody has progressed from one year to the next. But we would all expect Lauri to be where he is at the negative 12.6 on the off court. Honestly, one guy that surprised me is Svi. Like, we kind of jumped on Svi a few times, like, why is he playing? And his offensive efficiency, et cetera, his defensive efficiency. But the reality is when he's on the court, the team's actually better, relative to the other players that are there. So, I think we have to give some accolades to him. And of course, Kyle, we've already talked about, is there. And let's hope that Walt, in the limited time he's received, that these numbers are actually representative of what we're going to see, or even better moving forward. I mean, it's very encouraging, the last 3 games of how he's played. I mean, he just looks like he's got his confidence back. And he's a tough basketball player. I mean, he's tough. He's a great shooter, et cetera. So I'm really curious to see the next 10, 15 games to see how he performs.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we are looking at the 25-26 season. And in the next podcast, we're going to look at the previous, we're going to look at some previous numbers so that we can compare them to these. We're not going to look at any more numbers in this particular version of JazzSmack. So we wanted to put these numbers out there, though, so you could kind of think about them and see where we stand right now. And then in one of the subsequent podcasts, we're going to look at how these numbers looked previously to now. So that's how we're going to compare these. And so we'll look at like previous seasons and see where the players stood previously. Obviously, people like Walt and Ace won't appear in those previous seasons, but we have to have some sort of a baseline for the entire team right now. So anyway, that's what we're looking at right now, and that's what we wanted to just throw out there as like a starting point for these numbers to get some sort of a reference point moving forward. But let's talk now about the OKC Utah Jazz game, because quite frankly, I mean, I heard that Lauri wasn't playing, and it's like, okay, well, I don't know what the Jazz were thinking. I don't know if Lauri's injured or if he's sick or whatever, or if they just sat him because they wanted to sit him and give him rest. I don't know what the situation was. It kind of doesn't matter. But I was anticipating a bit more of a competitive game than what we got. I mean, if you look at the OKC Thunder, 4 of their 6 guys did not play in this game, meaning Lou Dort, meaning Isaiah Hartenstein, meaning Shea, meaning Alex Caruso. So that's 4 of the top 6 guys on that team, and 3 of the 5 starters did not play in that game. Yes, the Jazz were without Lauri. The Jazz are without Walker for the entire year, and I would argue those are their 2 best players to this point. So the Jazz are without their 2 best players in this game. But still, playing at home, I anticipated something more competitive than what we got. And quite frankly, I was rather disappointed that we couldn't get a more competitive game and get more meaningful development minutes for the guys. And the effort on the defensive end, as Michael Cage and his broadcast partner for the OKC kept on saying, they said repeatedly they couldn't believe how non-competitive this Utah Jazz team is on the defensive end, and they said that multiple times. And I think we all agree with that, and that is what is disappointing still. We're 20-something games into the season, and we're still talking about these same issues with the lack of competitiveness. And it's frustrating to see, because the development minutes can be so much better if the game is not so out of reach. Especially, it was basically done in the first quarter yet again.
Did you listen? I'm sure you saw the clips of Hardy just like letting the team have it.
Yeah.
And I watched it, and honestly, I have mixed feelings about that. In part because I feel like he's done a lot this year. He's done that a lot. You know what he's done there? He's really chewed out players a lot. And I got to tell you, nothing's really changing. So what I wonder is what he's doing effective? Well, clearly not, because nothing is changing, but is what he's trying to do the best style and being able to motivate the players? Because either they don't have the skill, the scheming is wrong, the motivation is wrong, tuning him out, like something is not really working, right, on the defensive end. And, like I applaud a guy that's trying to get the team to play harder. I absolutely applaud that, but I've seen that a lot this year. And for whatever reason, it's not working. And it's not that I have a solution. I'm not a coach, right? I'm not saying I know how to motivate them or not motivate them. I'm not suggesting that. But what I'm suggesting is the guy who is the coach, what he's doing is not working. So I just wonder if that style is helpful. Honestly, I do see it from other coaches across the NBA. But I got to tell you, like this year, Will has done that a lot, and it does not seem to be resonating with this young team, in my opinion.
It's clear as day to me that there is a component of this is coaching. I've said that since day one of this. I watched the Utah Jazz that first year, and a component of this is coaching. You can't just throw it all on the players. Yeah, the Jazz don't have a bunch of plus defensive players. I completely concur with that. But the lack of competitiveness on the defensive end and the schemes too. I mean, it's just open three after open three after open three. And it's just bizarrely you just can't be at the bottom of the defensive ratings year after year after year and say that a component of that is not the coaching. So I don't know how anybody can argue that. Yeah, there's a bunch of people out there in Utah Jazz land right now that just don't even care. That just want the Jazz to lose for draft picks. But you also have to build some sort of a culture with the guys that are here. You can't just have them develop a whole bunch of bad habits and then expect to flip that. Guys who develop bad habits in the NBA, it's really hard to turn those guys around. That's why it's so important to get these guys in as rookies and teach them really good habits so they don't ever get into this situation where they have a bunch of bad habits. So you don't want these guys from another team that's been in the league for 8 years to have all these bad habits, because it's really hard to break those. So I don't see the good habits forming right now on the defensive end, and the scheming, quite frankly, I don't agree with that either. And it's frustrating.
And I'm not going to talk about specifically the scheming. The part that I go back to is the motivation by intimidation. And intimidation's the wrong word, because Will's not intimidating anybody on the team. All these guys are bigger and stronger than he is, right? So he's not intimidating them. But is the in-your-face anger, cursing, etc., is it effective? And it just doesn't seem to be in motivating these guys. And they're young guys. And it's hard to figure out how to motivate a kid that's 20 years old, that's got a lot of money. It's extremely hard to do. And I'm not saying I could do it, but I'm also not paid to be the coach. The coach has to figure out a way to do it. And it doesn't seem to be resonating. And I agree with you, is that honestly, to keep our draft pick, we have to have a certain record this year. Everybody knows that. We don't have to dwell on tanking. Everybody kind of knows what's going on, right? At the same time, We want to develop good habits. We want players that are playing hard. And Will wants that. We want that as fans. And for whatever reason, there are a lot of open shots, as you said. There's a lot of non-competitiveness when people drive to the basket, and something needs to change there. And maybe that means you sit guys down. And he did that, I think, with Brice and Isaiah this last game. They both got 6 minutes. That was, I think, his way of telling them, look, you got to play harder. But I think it's got to extend to all of the players, not just those two. And it does seem that at least, Brice is always his like scapegoat. Isaiah, not as much so, but there are a couple of guys that he seems to always harp on, and the other ones he, in my opinion, he kind of lets go sometimes. So it's a little frustrating. But let me ask you something on the Oklahoma City game, because you made this comment the other day, and I thought about it, and it was about Lauri. Now, we all know Oklahoma City won the championship last year. During the regular season, I believe they had the biggest point differential in the history of the NBA. In my opinion, in the playoffs, they didn't necessarily show that level of dominance. They were good. They won. Give them credit for that. But I think they could have been beat in some of the series that they did. Now, two of their players that are key players are still relatively young. I think they're definitely better this year than they were last year. I think that they have other guys that are stepping up that didn't. Hey, but I'm getting a long-winded, explanation to get to my question to you. You made this comment, Lauri Markkanen on a great team is going to average 18 points a game or so and be the third best player. So Oklahoma City won the championship last year. If Lauri Markkanen is on Oklahoma City, do you rank him the third best player? Do you think that he's the third best player on Oklahoma City? If
No, I don't. I think he could be the best player and that OKC still win the title. But if you just throw him on that roster, he's not the third best player.
Which player what would you rank him on that roster?
I would put him behind Chet, so I'd put him fourth.
See, I'd put him second. And that's like the point I'm trying to make. You would put him fourth. I'd actually put him second because I don't think Chet consistently is as good as Lauri Markkanen right now. Now, Chet may get better, right? He has skills. He's taller, etc. But I wouldn't put Chet above Lauri right now. I'm not sure I'd put Jalen Williams above Lauri right now at their level of development. I just think that SGA is so good, and those other guys are really solid around him, and they're getting better. But I'm not convinced, and you have a different opinion, obviously. I'm not convinced that he couldn't be the second best player on a championship level team. In my opinion, Lauri doesn't get the credit that he necessarily deserves, and he's a better player than he actually is. And I do think on a championship level team, I agree he's not the top player, but I think he could be the second best player.
Well, I think his usage. His usage rate will just go down. That's my point. I'm not saying his efficiency is going to go down. His usage rate is going to go down. His efficiency actually may go up, but his usage rate is certainly going to go down. And the thing I really like about Chet and Jalen is those guys are both certainly plus defensive players, and Lauri's not a bad defensive player. But I think both those guys are certainly better defensive players. So, do
you think they're better offensively than Lauri?
No,
yeah.
But Chet's usage rate too. I mean, he's never going to playing on that team. He's never going to have the usage rate that Lauri does now. I mean, if you put Chet on the Jazz, I mean, what are his numbers? It's hard to speculate, but that's how I. Looking at it and just thinking about it, that's how I see it.
Yeah, I think that if you're the guy that every team focuses on every year, like every game, it's really hard to score 30 points a game, even if you chuck it all the time because the team's trying to shut you down. I think with that team, everybody tries to shut SGA down, and no one can. That guy's so good, no one can. It's impossible. You could try to shut him down with two guys. You couldn't shut that guy down. But I think those other two guys you actually could shut down if they were the focal point of the team. And that's my argument to say, like, look, you put Lauri on there. Yeah, he's not going to score 28 a game. I agree with that. But I'm getting, like, my view is he could be the second best player on that team right now. Now, do I think those other two guys are going to exceed him eventually, in my opinion? Maybe. At least Chet, I think, is. I don't know about Jay. I don't know about Jay Will. I'm not as big a fan as Jay Will as I think some others are, but that's my point. So you didn't come to the conclusion I thought you were going to that he's second best player, but that's kind of my opinion on it, is that he could be a second best player on a team, in my opinion.
It's very possible. And I think that he showed that he can play a meaningful role on a really good team this summer with Finnish team. I mean, he's clearly the guy on that team. It doesn't mean that Finland doesn't have other talent, because they do, but he's number one on the team, on the whiteboard in the locker room, saying here's what he's going to do and here's what we're going to defend. Lauri is always going to be number one on both this Utah Jazz team and on that Finnish national team. That Finnish national team was really good, and that's really competitive basketball. For anybody who doesn't see that Eurobasket is competitive, that's wrong. Those teams are good. A lot of talent over there. So he proved it there. And if we look at this OKC Utah Jazz game, I mean, let's face it. So OKC is out without their top four guys. The Jazz are without their top two guys, in my opinion, currently on the roster. But if you look at the players who did play for OKC, they have multiple guys better than the best Jazz player that played in that game. They have Chet, they have Jalen Williams, and I'll argue that Cason Wallace is better than all the rest of the Jazz players right now, because Cason Wallace showed that he can play a meaningful role, even though it wasn't a huge role. It was a meaningful in last year's playoffs on a title team. There aren't any other players on the Jazz roster that played in that game that could do that. None of those guys are going to go on a title team and play meaningful minutes. That's not where this Jazz roster is in development. I mean, that's the reality it's not to disparage the guys. It's meaning the guys are improving and they need to improve more. They're just not there yet. So that's the reality of it. I just wanted to see a more competitive game. I didn't necessarily mean that they had to win that game. I just don't want them to get down by 35.
Well, you know that I'm going to argue for Kyle, but everyone knows that, so I'm not going to argue for Kyle. The part that I was surprised with in this game, I thought Keyonte was going to have a huge game. And I think Keyonte didn't have a huge game because of Cason Wallace. And that, to me, that supports your point. Cason Wallace was great in that game.
Yeah.
Just great. He shut Keyonte down, and that's not an easy thing to do. Keontae's skill is scoring and getting the free throw line. He shut him down. Now, the refs didn't call fouls in that game. And honestly, I liked it. The number of foul shots was not high. That was a comment, I think, but I watched it in both the Jazz and the Oklahoma City. The fouls were not called in that game. But honestly, I hope that's a trend of where we're going, because the ridiculous foul shots got to stop. But I didn't think that Cason was going to be able to shut down Keyonte. And he not only shut down Keyonte, he frustrated Keyonte. Yeah. Kept stealing the ball. Like at the end of the first half, he stole it twice from him. I mean, one of them went on a crossover is unbelievable. You're just like, wow, dude, that is like so good. I mean, he blew the layup at the other end. Like he tried to do a fancy, and they missed it because the buzzer sounded, right? That wasn't great, but he was good. And you shut down an NBA score, a good NBA score in Keyonte, and that's really impressive. But he's good. Like you and I have talked about, he may be the casualty of the Oklahoma City Thunder of not wanting to pay somebody. And I actually hope that's the case, because he's one guy I would really like to pick up. That guy is a solid NBA basketball player.
Defensively, that guy's really good. I mean, he and Caruso are undersized, and they're playing against much bigger guys lots of the time, but both those guys are just so good. His on-ball defense against Keyonte, and he picked him twice. Man, that was just It was just all, I mean, yeah, it's not good from the Jazz standpoint. It's not good from my standpoint from wanting the Jazz to be competitive in that game. But looking at that and looking how aggressive he was on the perimeter and knowing what Keyonte wanted to do and be ready for it. And as soon as Keyonte crossed him over, he's going to stick his hand in and pick it. I mean, it's just, I mean, the guy has very good physical dimensions. He has good quickness. He's strong. He's tough-minded. Yeah, he's really good. Really, really, really good.
No, that crossover was beautiful. He anticipated Keyonte crossing over and then put his hand in there. I mean, it was absolutely beautiful. I mean, just unbelievable. Like that steal where you just kind of step back, you say, you the man, right? I mean, that is impressive. And like I said, Keyonte this year has shown that he's thinner, he's more athletic, he's stronger, he can score. There's no question about it. Keyonte can score. He is a NBA scorer. He was shut down and frustrated. I mean, he got his turnovers, I think, out of frustration out of Wallace. I mean, Wallace did all of that. So give that guy some credit. And Chet had a great game too. I mean, Chet, maybe that proves your point that if SGA is not there, Chet has a much bigger role because he was fantastic, in that game as well. So very disappointing from the Jazz perspective because I thought they were at home in the altitude without amazing SGA, that they were going to be a much more competitive game. And that was one of our worst losses of the season. I mean, we just got clubbed without their best player on the other side. Of course, Lauri wasn't there too. Acknowledging that.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of where we want to leave things this evening. Do you have anything else?
Nope.
All right. Well, I think we will call this an end to this evening, and we'll see what happens in a few days. The Jazz are off for now a few days because of the NBA Cup games, so we're not going to see basketball for the next several days. But we will be back on in a few days and talk about the next subject, and likely it will be more data, more numbers to play off of what we talked about tonight and see where guys compare with how they did in previous seasons so that we can kind of compare and contrast. But anyway, we will call this an end. For those watching on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. You can also follow us on X at JazzSmack, and we will talk to everybody later.